From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics Now for Thursday, June 5th. We are only a few weeks away from the end of the 2025 legislative session, and we figured it wouldn't hurt to give you an overview of where things stand in Salem. After all, state lawmakers' to-do list was pretty long. We have crumbling roads and bridges, the looming threat of wildfires, and the housing crisis persists. So, what are state lawmakers doing to help us all out? We will discuss. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
I'm OPB Politics reporter Bryce Dole.
And I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk VanderHart.
And before we truly kick this thing off, just a note that we are live on opb.org/livestream and on OPB's YouTube page. So like, subscribe, watch, share. Thank you. All right, Dirk. All right, this session, overall, it's felt a little bit like everyone is just sort of plodding along. And maybe that's only noticeable because things are so dramatic at the national stage, but we've also had some pretty dramatic Oregon legislative sessions, and this one just hasn't been so far.
Yeah, you and me wrote about this at the half point of session, right? We went around the building, started talking to folks and said, what does this session feel like? And I think people said, what did we say? We said rudderless, chaotic, a session without a lot of direction. And that was because we just kind of, we knew there were big issues out there. You mentioned them: housing, behavioral health, wildfire, transportation. We hadn't seen a lot of action on those things. It didn't feel like there was serious momentum toward those. And I have to say, we are less than a month out. We're like 3 weeks and change out from the end of session. And I still talk to people in the halls, and they still kind of feel the same way. So many of those big questions that we were asking at the beginning of the session are sitting there. We don't know what's going to come of them. We don't know if there's the political will to pass them. So, you don't want to be unfair to folks. They're passing a lot of bills. They are enacting laws that are going to be meaningful to Oregonians, that are going to affect their lives. We don't want to minimize that. But when it comes to those kind of big ticket items, we just haven't seen that much action.
There is one bill, however, that has prompted quite a bit of intense debate, as they always do. Bryce, you wrote about a measure that would ban rapid-fire devices like bump stocks. Just set the scene for us. Tell us about that debate.
Yeah, so this is Senate Bill 243. This passed through the Oregon Senate last week. Like you said, it would ban rapid-fire devices like bump stocks. Essentially, these devices can make semi-automatic weapons fully automatic. This bill would also allow local governments to pass policies around like where people can carry concealed weapons and in what public buildings, those like where public meetings happen. Again, this bill came up on the Senate floor last week. There was this really lengthy and contentious debate that centered around, the classic gun control debate that you hear around the country right now and around how best to prevent mass shootings. Democrats and those gun reform advocates who have been backing this bill argued that there's just not really a reason for people to have bump stocks in the first place, and that they're designed for a single purpose, and that is to kill people. They argued that, keeping them out of the hands of folks could prevent mass shootings like the one that happened in Las Vegas a couple years ago when a gunman opened fire and killed a lot of people and injured hundreds more. So that's one thing. As for the rule around public buildings, they said that local governments should just be able to decide what's best for them around concealed carry rules, and that enforcing public safety in those public buildings, it should fall to police, not people with concealed weapons. So that was Democrats' side of things.
Right. And Democrats have a supermajority in both chambers, so they don't necessarily need Republican votes. But where were the Republicans on this debate?
Yeah, obviously, Republicans took serious issue with those arguments, just like the gun rights advocates around the state who have been saying that these policies are just among the policies that have incrementally infringed upon people's Second Amendment rights that Democrats have been passing over the years. They argued also that this bill just won't keep guns out of the hands of criminals, and that it doesn't address the mental health issues that are often, some of the core problems around gun violence tragedies, shootings, and suicides, which are actually the leading cause of firearm fatalities in Oregon right now. And as for the public buildings rule, they argued that a lot of public governments, local governments, don't have the resources to handle this change, and that there's just too few law enforcement in some communities to preserve safety in every single meeting. They don't have enough metal detectors to keep those guns out of those buildings, and they're concerned that there will just be this patchwork of rules around the state.
The gun safety debate has been kind of interesting in recent years because of how so Republicans are uniformly against these things. Gun rights folks, or at least some of them, the Oregon Firearms Federation, would say they are not doing enough by not walking out. And so it was interesting to see when 243 passed the Senate, the OFF put out a story or a news release or whatever that said, Oregon Republicans pass major gun control bill. They firmly blame Republicans for passing these things at this point. It's very interesting the way this is shaken out.
And I remember that Senator Bonham also said on the Senate floor that he'd been getting messages from people urging him to walk out as well.
Right. Always happens.
So familiar line falls along party lines, familiar debate. Kind of a newer debate that I find really interesting, though, Dirk, is a bill that you wrote about earlier this week. Kind of a talker. If it passed, it would make Oregon the first state in the nation to grant unemployment checks to public employees who go on strike.
Right.
That is a really big deal. That's so interesting. I mean, we have seen some really big strikes in recent years with Portland Public Schools and the Providence nurses. I mean, we know the unions are backing this.
Yeah.
Unions are powerful.
Yeah. No, this is, unquestionably one of the most contentious bills we've seen this session. It's Senate Bill 916, and you're right. So what it does is ensures that any worker who's on strike, public, private, is eligible for unemployment benefits if they've been striking for more than 2 weeks. What's interesting about this is there are 3 other states that have this kind of law. One is Washington, which just passed it, but none of those 3 allow, under law, protect their public workers from striking. So Oregon is one where, you're right, we have seen public school teachers strike again and again. We have seen a number of other threatened strikes. We do allow public workers to strike. And so it's kind of uncharted territory here. And what we've seen is a couple arguments. The unions say, workers need a more even playing field. In the case of some strikes, they say, big corporations are just able to wait people out until their bank accounts are depleted. They need to crowdfund. They need to borrow money just to pay their bills. That's not fair. The line is they're being starved into a good contract. But the people against this say, look, this is not what our unemployment fund is for. You risk depleting it if all of a sudden strikes become so prevalent and so long because people now have this stability. They worry that the folks that pay into that fund are going to see increased taxes because the fund has more pressure on it. And they worry that the state is going to become just less business friendly. Actually, some of the biggest opponents of this bill have been school districts and local governments who really worry that their workers are going to go on strike and they are going to see some budget impacts because public employees actually have to reimburse for every dollar from the unemployment fund their workers use. So it has been a fascinating debate. I think people have seen it in some instances as a tough call, but ultimately Democrats in both chambers, almost all Democrats went with it, were unwilling to sort of listen to these concerns and went with the labor and worker concerns.
And what's its status right now in the legislature?
So it has passed the Senate and the House. It needs to go back to the Senate for a concurrence vote. We expect that will happen. And then it's on the way to Governor Kotek.
Okay. All right. So technically, this is a grab style podcast where we're supposed to give people a lot of very wonky information, but in like a very accessible, breezy, lighthearted fashion. Yeah. So we're going to try a lightning round. Okay. So I'm going to ask you each to update us on a few subjects. Let's see how quickly you can break it down for us. Bryce, housing. That's a big one. It's always a big issue in Salem. Give us the latest and just show Dirk, how succinct you can be.
The overarching thing, I think, right now is around housing is that Governor Kotek wants a lot more money to continue her housing initiatives that she's pushed forward in recent years. But it is becoming, I think it's fair to say, increasingly unclear that the legislature is going to be able to fulfill the entirety of her vision. She's budgeted hundreds of millions of dollars, $800 million toward housing and homelessness. And one of her major proposals it's a shelter bill that would dedicate $217 million for a statewide shelter program is basically in jeopardy right now. Representative Pam Marsh has been working with the governor on this bill, but it's becoming increasingly unclear as to what extent the state will be responsible for funding shelters around Oregon. There's some discussion because of the latest revenue forecast. There's these ongoing trade tensions, slow economic growth, and lawmakers are just dealing with a lot less money than they thought they were going to be working with. And so it'll be really interesting to see, as for the shelter bill, like if it will be $217 million or a lot less that the state starts funneling towards shelters around Oregon.
And do you have a sense of what this might mean for the current existing shelter system?
Yeah, so I've been talking to housing advocates about this, and they fear that if the state were to, I guess, downsize the level of funding towards shelters, that this could result in a lot more people winding up out on the street, that shelters might have to close. They basically make the argument that local governments don't have the funding right now to step in and pick up the costs if the state were to pull back. A lot of local governments have been dealing with budget gaps this year. So the interesting question is, in the next month, what will Governor Kotek's housing proposal, like what will the legislature be able to do about it exactly?
Okay, Dirk, he gave you some room to work with.
Yep.
All right, and you've been doing this a while. So I'm going to hit you with two pretty hard ones. But first, civil commitment. That is an issue that's been an issue
big time,
with a lot of emotion swirling around it for a very long time. But we have talked about on this podcast, there was some momentum. Is that still there?
Miraculously, you're right. After years of sort of fights over this, there seemed to be a movement. So civil commitment is when people are in crisis, the state can sort of take them into its care, force treatment on them for their own good, essentially. And there has been an argument for years now that the state's laws are way too restrictive. It makes it really hard to get people into care when they won't accept it and they are in very, very serious crisis. You're right. Earlier this year in the House, a bunch of stakeholders came together, found agreement on how we might change the laws, lower that barrier a little bit. This is one, though, that's kind of like the shelter issue Bryce is talking about. It is sitting in Ways and Means because there is agreement that if you're going to lower this threshold, there needs to be resources to expand the services. If you're putting more people in the care, there need to be the resources to care for those people, right? I think the governor has like a $90 million ask for that. But like he says, we are in a very tight budget. We don't know where lawmakers are going to come down on spending priorities. And so we don't know where this bill sits. It's in the budget committee. Is it going to move? I think if it doesn't, it feels like a wasted opportunity from all this really goodwill negotiating, but we just don't know at this point.
Okay, thank you. Second one, we are hearing from a lot of weather forecasters that it's going to be a very hot, dry summer.
Yeah.
There's like this looming sense of dread that we're going to have a bad wildfire season.
Yeah.
I seem to remember that last summer, the state could not pay the people who helped us fight those fires.
Indeed.
What is happening now?
Yeah. We talked about this, I think, a couple times on the podcast. This is another one of those big ones, big question marks going into the session because last December, lawmakers went into special session to pay our wildfire bills. We don't know. It's another one of those things where we have seen a number of proposals, from redirecting rainy day fund money, like taking this really obscure insurance tax, putting lottery money toward wildfire. I think one of the biggest developments recently is that Governor Tina Kotek a couple weeks ago said she is on board now with what is, I think, a politically dicey proposal, which is we would pull back a piece of this $1.7 billion kicker refund voters or Oregon taxpayers are expecting next year, take $1 billion of it, put it in a fund that generates interest and use that interest to pay our wildfire funds. That is something that has been pushed by a liberal Ashland Senator Jeff Golden for years. The governor being on board is, I think, a big deal. It's a kind of sticking her neck out for this. Very, very unclear that there are legs for that. And actually, there was some interesting drama around that last week when this bill that seemed to have a lot of bipartisan consensus to pull back these wildfire risk maps that have been a huge political hot button in the state. Democrats now agree we should pull them back. Republicans hate them. It passed the House, I think, with a lot of unanimity. Then all of a sudden, it passed the Senate with a lot of unanimity. Then all of a sudden in the House, Democrats are sending it to the Rules Committee kind of to be warehoused, and Republicans are saying they are using it as a bargaining chip, saying, you want this bill, Republicans, you got to give us the kicker, or you got to give us some sort of tax increase to pay for wildfires if you want it. We don't know exactly what the situation is, if it really is that cut and dried bargaining chip, but that is the drama circulating in Salem. It'll be fascinating to see if anything happens.
We are at that point in session where people are looking for leverage wherever they can get it.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
All right.
Oh, no, I wanted to ask you. So not just us.
Me. Okay.
You have covered a number of interesting bills as well. I mean, I'm thinking of two. But first, foster care, something you have covered a lot over the time. There's a big bill this session, I think another contentious one. Where does it say?
It is. It's contentious. You have really interesting people on both sides of it. So basically, the goal of the bill is to create more suitable placement for kids placed in foster care, right? That's been an issue for a long time. This measure does it by trying to ease regulations and change definitions around abuse and restraint. It also allows the state to send kids placed in foster care out of state again. And they tried that again.
Yeah.
They tried that in 2019. It was very unsuccessful. A lot of kids got hurt. Then they decided to stop that practice. So this would allow them to do that again. What is very interesting about this is you have Democrats, including the governor, who's very in favor of this, who really thinks this is going to help fix a broken system. And then you have Democrats, including both the co-chairs of the House and Senate Human Services Committee, who are opposed to it, who are saying, you know what, this is going to harm more kids. So yes, very contentious. It's sitting in rules right now.
I mean, you did a ton of reporting back when they first were doing this, showing, you know, as much as they might have been trying to ensure they were putting kids in safe spaces, they really weren't. And kind of they didn't have their hands on the wheel of that. And so I think now people are saying, what, we will do a better job. We will ensure that this is a better fit.
I mean, a lot of this boils down to credibility, right? Like, do you trust the agency that is going to be steering this? Right. And, you know, I think you have the governor who is saying, yeah, I trust them. I trust this child welfare agency to do what they're saying they're going to do. And then you have other lawmakers who are like, we've seen this before. Didn't work out so well.
You are also tracking one of the other how many looming crises have we talked about?
This is a doom podcast.
But public defense in Oregon for years and years, as long as I've been covering the legislature, has not been doing well. And now it's doing maybe worse than ever. I mean, what are lawmakers doing to ensure people who are entitled to an attorney are getting an attorney in the state?
Yeah, this is another area where the crisis is getting worse and not better. I mean, every month it's getting worse. There are more people. I think there are currently like 4,400 people who do not have an attorney who should have an attorney, right? The Constitution, both the United States and the Oregon Constitution, says that you should have an attorney even if you cannot afford an attorney. So just this week, the new head of the state's public defense system unveiled this big plan. He has a lot of steps. One of those steps is like, seemingly pretty obvious fix, like let's hire more lawyers to take on more cases.
Yeah.
To do that, you've got to be able to pay them. And that's where the legislature will come in this session. What's the budget for the public defense system going to look like? Can they put that money to good use?
And we don't have a lot of money, so we will see again.
Okay, another, and I would argue that maybe this is the centerpiece of this session, is the transportation package. That's a very ambitious package.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically. And on this front, there's been a little bit of drama, some behind closed door meetings, some secret negotiations.
Yep.
Break it down for us.
I mean, the simple fact is we haven't seen a bill. We don't know when a transportation bill is coming. We don't know what that transportation bill might look like. And we are 24 days away from the end of session right now. Very interesting times. The latest, you're right, there's all sorts of negotiations going. I mean, you and I talked last week about cap and trade has suddenly emerged as a potential to help fund our roads and bridges. That's still being discussed behind the scenes. The latest thing that happened this week is that a group of progressive Democrats came forward with their own idea for what a transportation package should look like. And what they really did is built on this framework that Democrats released earlier in the session. That framework was like, let's raise the gas tax 20 cents, let's raise all these other taxes and fees, raise it about $1 billion a year and pour that into roads. This group of progressives is saying, we need more than that. Let's actually raise more that will help us pay for transit because we don't want our bus and rail systems falling off the cliff. Let's raise more to help pay for bike and ped projects. Let's pay for all these things. And I think it's about a $2.5 billion package every 2 years. They're saying, we need more. Let's really shoot for the moon. I don't know how politically real that package is. It seems like it's a long shot. But so now we have the sort of progressive Dems with their package. Democratic leadership with their package. We have Republicans saying, let's gut all our funding for transit and put that into roads and a number of other things. And we just have, one, no idea what is going to come out in a bill. Two, whether that has any chance of passing. I mean, you got to figure leadership is counting votes behind the scenes and trying to triangulate what is going to get 31 in the House. Or actually, it has to get 3/5 in the House and Senate. So what can get those votes? And I think it's a sign that that is a very hard problem, that we are where we are this close to the end of the session and haven't even seen a bill.
No, I was just going to say that's kind of wild that we have not seen a bill on that yet.
People would say that in 2017, the last time we passed the transportation package, the bill didn't come out until I think May 31st. So we're now beyond that. We are really in the final days. I mean, toward the end of the session, the presiding officers say sine die is imminent, and that means we can give an hour notice before we do anything. Like, we are in that zone. It is imminent. And everyone's waiting to see what happens.
What we have seen, however, is thousands of other bills, thousands, too many other bills. And so one idea this session was, well, it's an idea every session. Like, let's limit these bills.
People always talk about it, right?
People always talk about it. But this session, it felt like it had the leadership behind it. It had some momentum. Like, is that going to happen? Dirk, tell me that's going to happen.
No. No, but you are right. So I think there's 3,400 bills that have been introduced, right? And you're right. What has been unique, everyone always grouses about the number of bills. This is a record number. It really did feel early in the session like there was just too much stuff flying around. No one could keep track of it. You and I talked at length about placeholder bills and the transparency issues those pose. What we saw this year, though, is House Speaker Julie Fahey and I think the Senate President Rob Wagner actually put forward or got behind a bill that would limit bills. It would say any lawmaker can only introduce 25 bills. There's a bunch of other allowances, like I think committee chairs get 15 bills. The presiding officers can put as many as they want. The governor gets a bunch, other executives. But they're saying, all right, let's formally do this, because there are lawmakers who put out hundreds of bills, right? That got a hearing in the House Rules Committee last week. And what we saw was a real divergence that is probably why this thing isn't going to move, right? Like, some Democrats really like it. Other Democrats hate it. Republicans despise it because they say I think the math they did is that they would get 900 bills under this scheme. Democrats would have like 2,500. Obviously, Republicans are in the minority, but they feel like the tables would be sort of against them. So they really hate it. I think some Dems hate it. The reality is, Lauren, like, Democrats control everything. So Republicans can put forward as many bills as they possibly can, and it's still the Democratic committee chairs that are going to say, this is what gets hearings and this is what doesn't. What we heard from Republicans, though, is we just like to introduce bills to show people kind of what our leadership might look like. David Brock Smith, the senator from Port Orford, said, I think he said at one point, like, DBS has a bill for that. I think he's introduced more bills than anyone else or among. And yeah, he puts forward bills that show what a world would look like if David Brock Smith was king. They never, a lot of them don't go anywhere. And I guess lawmakers see value in that. So anyway, I do not expect this to move. Okay. It's not the type of thing that even has to have legislation to change. Like, lawmakers could agree to do this with their own rules. I don't think it's going anywhere. I might be wrong.
All right. There are only 24 days left in this session. That is a time when, we've already said, emotions get more intense. Yeah. Conversations get a little more heated. Yeah. Are we seeing that? Like, what are the dynamics in the building?
Yeah, I think similar to what you and I have talked about. I mean, the Senate this year blessedly has been the center of calm. I think, there are the gripes and the miscommunications or disagreements, but it has by and large been a pretty smooth chamber. The House is where we are seeing more delay tactics. They're doing more bill reading. They're stopping things up. As a result, actually, they are doing longer hours. I think they're meeting right now. They will meet again at 4 p.m. Like, they need to get through their slate of bills. But also, just like, it's not just Democrat and Republican at this stage. Like, people get angry with each other. Just this week, I was sitting on the House floor watching something I'd never seen before, which was a Republican representative from Grants Pass, Dwayne Yunker, literally cursing out Republican leader Christine Drazan over, and I won't repeat what he said, but over some disagreement they were having. Like, the intra-party tensions are real. The inter-party tensions are real. Everyone is just kind of trying to get out of the building.
An interesting thing with sine die, which is Latin for legislative adjournment, is we always know it's coming because especially the House, Nancy Nathanson, I'm thinking of her. She starts to wear a hat.
Yep.
Other people start to wear like floral Hawaiian shirts. Like you know that they think it's close because of how they start to dress. So I have two questions for you guys. One, when they get close on this podcast, do you both commit to also dressing up?
I mean, if Rep. Nathanson would lend me one of her hats, I would be honored to wear it on this podcast. I don't think she will do that. And she's not wearing them yet.
On the record, she's not wearing them yet.
I would dress up as long as I get to wear flip-flops, yeah.
Oh, you could wear flip-flops.
Okay.
And then, final question. Do we have any predictions when this thing is going to wrap up?
I mean, people are talking about that all the time in the halls. Like, I talked to a business lobbyist this week that was like, they could do it next week if they wanted. That is never going to happen. And, like, as much as people like to talk about early adjournment in the legislature, it is very, very rare. At most, it's usually a day or two. And that's because there's like, we were talking about transportation here. There's a sort of induced demand, if you will, to the session, right? Induced demand is this concept where if a road is there, people are going to use it until it gets cluttered up. If there's days left in session, people are going to find ways to use them to push their bills, to get their policies across. And so I could be wrong. Prove me wrong, y'all. But I think this thing is going till late June like it's supposed to. I think a lot of people share that sentiment.
All right. Well, guys, one bonus question, apparently. I'm going to toss it to the man behind the glass, our editor, Andrew Thien. He wants to weigh in.
We have a live stream going, obviously. There's a question in the live stream that I'm not sure we can answer, but let's try. Any updates on SB 110? That's the baseball jock tax that would redirect money to potentially build a Major League Baseball stadium. The listener asks, seems like it's been stuck in House committee forever.
Yes, this thing sailed through the Senate on a wave of good feeling. Everyone thought, this is a common sense step we can take to sort of help Portland. And the thinking behind this is if we were to somehow get an MLB team in Portland, we could sort of cordon off all the income taxes from that team into a special fund that helped pay for a stadium. People loved it in the Senate. It is sitting, I believe, in House Revenue, which held an informational hearing on it last week. I still expect it to go. I mean, there are some concerns about it, but I think most people really like it and see it as a relatively low risk. Nancy Nathanson, the House Revenue Chair, held an informational last week and seemed to be saying, I just want to make sure we all have our questions answered, our I's are dotted, our T's are crossed, but we didn't get any serious indication that it wouldn't move. So I still think that this thing has legs.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that, it's so interesting how hypothetical this bill is, right? I mean, it's if we were to be granted in Portland, an MLB team. We've got, I think, Salt Lake City that is also vying for having their own team, and Salt Lake City just kind of has, a funding stream like kind of all set up. If I remember correctly, is just further down the road than Oregon is right now. So I think there's just really big questions around it still.
All right. Thank you both. And thank you to our listener out there. This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded live in the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by the man behind the glass, Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Nalene Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. For those of you following along on our YouTube page or our OPB homepage, thank you. We love to hear from you. If you have comments on the live stream or thoughts about politics in these uncertain times, send us a message. Email us at opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. We will be back next week with more news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, thank you for your support. Thank you for listening.